What if the most powerful voice in your life is the one you have never truly heard? Not the voice of your thoughts, not the noise of your fears, not the constant commentary running inside your head, but the silence beneath all of it. Jalal ad-Din Rumi once wrote, "Silence is the language of God. All else is poor translation." In a world that rewards noise, speed, and reaction, these words feel almost rebellious. Yet they carry a secret that shaped his entire spiritual journey. If you listen closely, not just with your ears, but with your being, you may begin to sense that what you have been searching for in words has always been waiting for you in silence. Rumi did not arrive at this understanding easily. In his early life, he was a respected scholar, a preacher, a man of language and knowledge. His sermons were full of eloquence. His students admired his mastery of theology. But everything changed when he met Shams of Tabriz. In their intense companionship, something unexpected happened. The scholar of words began to fall into wordlessness. The encounter dismantled his identity as a learned authority and opened him to a deeper, more dangerous path, the path of inner silence. In the Masnavi, often called the Quran in Persian, Rumi writes, "Listen to the reed, how it tells a tale, complaining of separations." The very first line is not about speaking, but about listening. The reed flute sings because it has been hollowed. It is empty inside, and only through that emptiness can music emerge. The first teaching of silence is this: silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of depth. When Rumi speaks of silence, he is not referring to a quiet room or the absence of conversation. He is pointing to an inner stillness that exists even in the middle of chaos. In the Divan-e-Shams, he writes, "I have put duality away. I have seen that the two worlds are one. One I seek, one I know, one I see, one I call. This unity cannot be grasped by constant mental chatter. The mind divides, silence unifies. The more we cling to opinions, narratives, and inner debates, the further we drift from that oneness. Silence becomes the doorway through which fragmentation dissolves." The second teaching is that silence reveals what noise hides. We often fear silence because it confronts us with ourselves. Without distraction, we meet our loneliness, our unresolved grief, our longing. Rumi understood this confrontation deeply. "The wound is the place where the light enters you," he wrote in the Masnavi. "But that light cannot enter if we continuously cover the wound with distraction. Silence exposes the wound. It allows us to feel it fully. And in that raw exposure, something miraculous happens. The wound becomes an opening rather than a weakness." Silence, then, is not comfort. It is courage. It asks us to sit without escape. The third teaching is that silence is the soil where love grows. Rumi's poetry overflows with passionate language, yet behind the ecstasy, there is always stillness. "Close your eyes, fall in love, stay there," he says in the Divan. To stay there requires an inward quiet. Love, for Rumi, was not merely emotion. It was annihilation of the ego. And the ego thrives on noise, on defending itself, justifying itself, narrating itself. Silence loosens the ego's grip. When the inner commentary softens, love can move without obstruction. This is why many of Rumi's poems end in an invitation to silence, as if words themselves must eventually bow and disappear. If you notice carefully, even now as you listen, there is a small space between each thought, a subtle pause between each breath. Rumi would say that this space is not empty. It is alive. It is where the beloved waits. And yet we rush past it, afraid of its vastness, clinging instead to the familiar noise that keeps us feeling in control. But control was never the goal. Surrender was. And surrender begins not with speaking, but with listening. And listening, for Rumi, was not a passive act. It was a form of surrender so total that it dissolved the listener. In the Masnavi, he writes, "Become nothing, and he'll turn you into everything." This is the fourth teaching of silence. Silence is the path to ego death. Not destruction in a violent sense, but dissolution in love. As long as the self insists on being the center, on being right, recognized, validated, there is noise, constant interpretation, constant defense. Silence begins when the need to be someone relaxes. Rumi's transformation after meeting Shams was not simply emotional, it was existential. The respected jurist became a whirling mystic. The teacher became the lover. The man of arguments became the man of poetry. Why? Because Shams shattered the structure of his identity. In the Divan-e Shams, he confesses, "I was raw, I cooked, I burned." The burning was not loud, it was inward. It was the quiet dismantling of everything he thought he was. And in that inner burning, words began to lose their authority. Silence became his master. To be silent in this way does not mean withdrawing from life. Rumi was not advocating indifference or cold detachment. On the contrary, he was fiercely alive. But his aliveness came from a center that was no longer agitated by every passing thought. When the ego quiets, perception changes. You begin to notice how much of your suffering is generated not by events themselves, but by the commentary layered upon them. Silence interrupts the commentary. It creates a sacred gap. This gap is where transformation occurs. In the Masnavi, Rumi tells stories of kings and beggars, lovers and fools, each narrative circling back to a single point. What you seek is already within you, yet the treasure is buried under noise. Why are you so busy with this or that or good or bad? He asks. Pay attention to how things blend. Blending requires stillness. If you are constantly labeling, comparing, judging, you cannot see the deeper unity of experience. Silence allows opposites to soften. It allows you to witness without immediately reacting. The fifth teaching of silence is that silence is intimacy with the divine. For Rumi, God was not a distant authority, but an immediate presence. But this presence could not be grasped through intellectual effort alone. Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment, he writes. Cleverness is noisy. It analyzes, categorizes, controls. Bewilderment is quiet. It stands in awe. Silence moves you from cleverness to wonder. And in wonder, the heart opens. There is a subtle paradox here. Rumi wrote thousands of lines of poetry, yet he constantly pointed beyond language. Again and again, he reminds the reader that words are only signs. When the pen came to love, he says in the Masnavi, it broke. Love cannot be fully articulated. The deepest truths fracture language. This is why, at the height of his poems, there is often a shift, an exclamation, a sigh, an invitation to stop reading and simply feel. It is as if he is guiding you to the edge of words and then gently pushing you into silence. Consider how much of your life is spent reacting. A message arrives, a memory surfaces, a fear appears. Immediately, the inner voice begins to narrate. What does this mean? What should I do? What will happen next? Rumi's invitation is radical. Before answering, become silent. Before deciding, become silent. Before defending yourself, become silent. Not as suppression, but as awareness. In that awareness, you may discover that many impulses lose their urgency. What felt overwhelming begins to soften. Silence does not remove pain. Rumi never promised escape from suffering. But silence changes your relationship to it. Instead of drowning in the story of pain, you begin to witness it. And in witnessing, you are no longer entirely identified with it. The storm may continue, but you are not only the storm, you are also the sky in which it moves. And yet, reaching that sky requires patience. Silence is uncomfortable at first. It exposes the restlessness you have long ignored. It reveals how addicted the mind is to movement. But if you remain, if you resist the urge to fill the space, you begin to sense something else emerging. A quiet joy, a subtle presence, not dramatic, not spectacular, just steady. Rumi would say this steadiness is the beloved drawing near, not through thunder, but through stillness, not through argument, but through listening. And as you begin to taste this inner quiet, you realize that silence is not empty at all. It is full of awareness, full of love, full of a presence that cannot be named but can be felt. And once you begin to feel it, even faintly, you cannot return to noise in the same way, because something inside you has recognized home. Rumi understood that once the heart tastes true silence, it begins to crave it more than applause, more than validation, more than being understood. In the Masanavi, he writes, "There is a voice that doesn't use words, listen. That voice does not shout, it does not compete, it does not argue. It waits, patiently, beneath your anxieties, beneath your ambitions, beneath the endless stream of thoughts that convince you that you are separate, incomplete, behind. This is why silence is not weakness, it is return." When Rumi speaks of returning, he often uses the metaphor of going back to the root. "Return to the root of your own soul," he writes in the Divani Shams. The root is not found in external achievement. It is not found in collecting information. It is not found in proving your worth. The root is discovered when the layers fall away, and layers fall away in silence. Think of the reed flute again. It only sings because it has been emptied. The hollow space is not a flaw. It is the very condition for music. In the same way, the spaces in your life, the pauses, the waiting, the moments when nothing seems to be happening, are not wasted time. They are openings. But only if you allow them to be silent. Most of us resist these openings. When we feel uncertainty, we rush to fill it. When we feel loneliness, we drown it in distraction. When we feel pain, we cover it with noise. Yet Rumi whispers through centuries, "Do not run. Stay. Listen. Sit, be still, and listen," he implies through the rhythm of his verses, even when the exact phrasing shifts across translations. The essence remains the same. Stillness is not the end of movement. It is the beginning of understanding. There is also humility in silence. The ego wants to declare, to conclude, to dominate the narrative. Silence bows. Silence admits, "I do not know." And in that admission, a deeper wisdom begins to emerge. Rumi writes, "Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment." Bewilderment is sacred because it softens the mind's grip. It allows mystery to breathe. When you practice inner silence, even for a few moments, you may notice something subtle. The need to react slows down. The urge to defend yourself weakens. The constant comparison with others begins to fade. You start to experience life more directly, less filtered through commentary. And in that directness, there is a quiet joy that does not depend on circumstances. This joy is not loud. It does not announce itself. It is like a steady flame protected from the wind. The world around you may still be chaotic. Challenges will not disappear. Loss will still come. But your relationship to them changes. Instead of being swept away by every wave, you learn to feel the depth of the ocean beneath it. Rumi's life itself was a testament to this depth. After the disappearance of Shams, he experienced immense grief. Yet from that grief came some of the most luminous poetry ever written. Pain did not silence him in bitterness. It deepened him into surrender. And that surrender was rooted in the silence he had learned to trust. The beloved was no longer only outside him. The beloved had become the quiet center within. Now the question is not whether silence exists. It does. The question is whether you are willing to enter it, whether you are willing to pause before reacting, whether you are willing to sit with your own heart without distraction, whether you are willing to listen to that wordless voice Rumi spoke of. Perhaps tonight or tomorrow morning you will try. Just a few minutes. No music, no phone, no narration, just breath, just awareness. And maybe in that simple act, you will begin to understand what Rumi meant when he said, "Silence is the language of God. All else is poor translation." If this reflection resonated with you, if something in these words stirred a deeper quiet inside your heart, then stay connected. Subscribe to this channel so we can continue exploring the timeless wisdom of Rumi and other mystics who remind us how to return to ourselves. Leave a like if you felt the power of inner silence today, and share this video with someone who might need a moment of stillness in a noisy world. Because sometimes the greatest gift you can offer another person is an invitation to listen.